All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Cloud Conversations. My name is Azure McFarlane, and I am here with my friend Ru Campbell. And today's show, we have some fantastic guests. Ru, why don't you go ahead and introduce them?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Azure. Two guests that can't believe that's your real name, which we were just talking about. And, I just can't imagine what your day must be like every day. Just people like, is
They
that your
told
real
me,
name?
look, on the record, wherever, I don't know which side you guys look on my screen, but they promised they're going to help get me money this year. So, I'm putting that on the record.
Good stuff. Yeah. So today we're kind of continuing. So far, we've had, well, this is the third packed exam reference show we've really had. We've had the guys on that did the SC-300 and the SC-400, and now we're on to the SC-200. And the packed exam guide for that was written by Anich and Trevor Stewart. So I'll hand over to you guys. Say hello, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so my name's Joe Anich, Senior Customer Engineer at Microsoft. I primarily do, actually, I only do IR. So if you've heard of our Dart team at Microsoft, I accompany them in their engagements with customers. So my technology focus is primarily, endpoint management, endpoint security. So MDE is my space, MDI as well, a little bit of MCAS, but not so much. But yeah, I mean, so what I do for a living is, when a customer is having an incident or a security incident where they think they need some, additional help, they'll engage with Microsoft through CSS, which I think we're all familiar with, our support framework. They'll do some triaging and then say, yeah, we need to get you in touch with the Dart team. They start engaging, and then they reach out to my team. So my team is the CEIR team, which is a relatively new team. I think that it was created last year. We as customer engineers, as Trevor once was, had been doing this for years. It's just now more of a formal thing. So yeah, I guess that's a short little bit about what I do, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit more later.
Yeah, and hey everybody, Trevor Stewart. I'm a Senior Cloud Solution Architect here at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for about 4 years as an FTE, and then 2 years right before that as a vendor. Got converted over to the good side of the house, which is awesome. I entered into Microsoft with the same role as Joe. In fact, we were actually the same team for a very short period of time, which is pretty cool. We got hired in by the same manager. And so Joe and I go way back. Joe and I go back before Microsoft to his previous role, where I was a vendor and he was a partner at Microsoft. And I don't know, it's just been friendship at first sight, really. Whenever we stand up, if you guys see us in real life, we're both 6'5" plus. And so that alone was an immediate connection. But my background really is about, 15, 16 years of, IT experience. I started out in the system management space, primarily like an Active Directory, SCCM, MDT, anything that kind of touched those technologies. And then in 2016, 2017, I got called upon, like Joe does every day. I got called onto a massive ransomware incident, and it took me to across the pond to Ru, to your side of the pond for 6 months straight. And during that engagement, I was in the United Kingdom. I was in Birmingham, and let me just tell you something. There was this light inside of me that was just lit up for security, and I really never turned back. And so I've made a pivot into the cybersecurity and identity space in 2017. And then I've changed roles the past 6-7 months to the role I'm in now, which is a cloud solution architect. And we partner closely with the Joes of the world at Microsoft and really everybody in between. But my primary focus is anything security or identity related in the Azure space. And on the modern work side of Microsoft, which is like the Microsoft 365 suite, which is a big portion of the SC-200, I cover that as well. And then if technologies touch it, I try to touch it too, and just help our customers succeed and be successful in security. So really excited to be here, and we're grateful for the opportunity to chat a bit.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to have you guys on. And I guess the first question that comes to mind then is, if you guys go back a little bit, is it kind of like if you want one of us, you have to get both of us as far as the book goes? Was it like it always had to be a team effort, or how did that come about? Was it a coincidence?
That's so
Yeah.
funny. So Joe, I know you're gonna have some funny comments to this, but ever since Joe and I met, I've always envisioned us as like the dynamic duo, right? Even though we changed roles and different teams, it didn't matter. And so literally any single time I get something questioned to me, I ping Joe and I say, yo. And apparently, according to you, and I'll let you go ahead and speak about it, Joe, every time I say yo, he knows what I'm about to ask.
No, he's about to ask me if I want to do something. When we first met, it was kind of that moment, like if you've seen the movie Step Brothers, where they're like, talking about like, wait, you like this? Oh, you like that? And like, are we just best friends now? It's kind of a funny moment. The customer that we were working with, obviously, we don't like to mention names, but the customer we found ourselves working on together, where we actually met, it was just kind of one of those funny moments where it was just like, he'd slide a joke and I'd be like, that's hilarious. And it was just, instant chemistry. And we both kind of have that same mentality, that same, like we only operate in sixth gear. We're both like, go, go, go. We love what we do. We're passionate about it. And, when you find somebody that has that same drive, it's easy to align on, hey, do you want to do this? It's like, absolutely, I'd love to. And so we just kind of keep bouncing off each other in terms of like, hey, let's go do this. Okay, cool. And hey, let's go do this. Okay, cool. And then, the opportunity for the book was like, any of my friends who know me, they're like, you're going to write a book? Come on, man. Who are you trying to kid? And I was like, myself, apparently. But it was a cool opportunity for, several reasons, because I'm passionate about the segments of the book that I'm, good with. And then it would force me to learn out, more things outside of the box that I find myself in sometimes with kind of the MDE space. So it was fun. Him and I, despite coming from very similar backgrounds, have very different specialties. So it was very easy to align them and fill in the details of the book. So it really made sense. It was fun.
And then Joe is I always make a joke that he's the older brother I've never had, but always needed in my life, because there's a few years of difference between us from an age perspective. But I mean, the way that he works, the way I work, we're a little bit different. And so I can't tell you how many times he would call me or text me or whatever it is saying, basically get online, show up, and we're knocking out this chapter because of the deadlines. Because the way it works, you put together this outline, which gives the publishing company an idea of, your direction as an author. We didn't know at the time that they would hold us to that outline so specifically. And so we were submitting some chapters that were close enough, but they weren't spot on to what we said we were going to write about. And they kept telling us to modify this outline. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm so task oriented. I said, all right, outline done, on to the next. So we're way over here, like midway through the book. They said, hey, can you go update the outline? I'm like, why? It has no policy. It doesn't define what we're writing. And we found out it's because that's the outline is what's shown on Amazon or any platform that we're trying to sell the book on. But I mean, Joe kept me like very aligned with, hey, we just be quiet. Let's get it done. No, there were times where he would be on an incident response in Japan, China, Germany, way over there, right? And so he was working flipped hours. And so I'm over here just focused on American time zone. Joe's focused on anything but America in the time zone standpoint, but he still had the brother-like interaction and smacked me upside the face virtually. No excuses.
Yeah.
I have to ask, did you guys go do a simultaneous interview together too? And you both dressed up in like a really 70s, 80s kind of tuxedo, get up? Is that part of the gig too?
No, but that's not outside the possibility.
Yeah. But hey, honestly, don't tempt us because we will do that.
Book signing. First book signing. I need to see this.
Speaking of suits, this dude's always wearing a suit. I'll get a picture from him like at the grocery store on Saturday, and I'm like, dude, are you in slacks? Like, what are you? It's Saturday.
Wait, and we didn't get this special treatment either, Trevor. What's
No. So my style's changed a bit, and I'm grateful for it. So when before COVID, like I was only like in button downs and blazers, and I thought that was casual, right? But a little more relaxed, as you can see today.
Yeah, I broke that down for him wearing a T-shirt every day.
Yeah, you did.
Whatever
Like, bro,
free
you
clothing
care
they
about
give
how
me.
you look. Like,
I'm currently wearing shorts. Like I've got my little button up on, but I'm
Good.
definitely wearing some shorts.
good
So
for you.
This is business attire, sports pants and a hoodie.
Yeah. It was
part
a
of
good
it is
experience.
professional. It's fine. I'm
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, neither of us ever expected, no matter how, expert we got on a field, neither of us thought, oh, let's go write a book on it. And so it was such a strange, but hold on, like eye-opening, should I do this type of opportunity? And ultimately we said yes. And so it took the better half of the majority of a year, really, back and forth. We learned a lot. I mean, obviously coming from a background of never writing a book in our lives, we don't understand like the publishing, the editing, the submission, the draft, nothing. We just know the content we're writing about and where we can derive information from publicly, how we can add our own voice and experience to unique elements of like the gotchas in the world, so that we can write a book that, it has a lot of the exam content in there, but I mean, I'll speak for myself. That wasn't my goal. Like when I was writing the book, like I'm not thinking, I want to cover all the exam content. It's like, I want to cover the real world content that just so happens to accidentally align to something that's published and people can achieve a certification in.
Yeah, right before we start, well, just a quick note on kind of the experience. For me anyways, there was a huge like mental barrier to overcome, and mental or emotional barrier of like, am I even good enough to write this book? Like, what are the credentials needed to write this book? Like, who am I to think I can share what I know? There was all sorts of doubt. So it was actually very hard to get started writing to overcome that. And it like every time I was writing, I was thinking like, I can't wait for that first review to come in and be like, this book is crap. Like, it just like, validate all of the doubts that I had. Who knows? It still might happen, but it was a very, very interesting process, nonetheless. But yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We got 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s on every chapter. So we're like, all right, let's go.
It's funny how our brains work, right? And goes to worst possible case scenario.
Yeah.
Not
Always.
What if this succeeds? It's what if I'm a failure?
And all the worst part.
Right. What about the worst part? And I'm like, okay, I understand you're trying to protect me, but it's that it's really just funny how I have to be like, okay, let's reframe this. What if the good thing happens? And look what happened. The good thing is happening.
Yeah, the other so as like Trevor was saying, the Microsoft through their own publishing company, which I think is Pearson now, they released their exam reference books, which I don't know if you've ever read one of those, but it's very much the topics of the exam and, very definitely high level stuff, which we definitely do high level stuff in our book, right? We're held to page counts. There's some metrics, that we have to stay within. We can't just make the book 1,000 pages long. But yeah, we had to take, well, I wouldn't say we had to take, Trevor and I wanted to take a different approach of, like we want people to read the book and feel confident, like, hey, I think I learned enough from this that I understand everything on, the exam or the topics on the exam, but also to come away with more operational skills, more like, here's how it looks in the real world. If you were to look at an exam ref book, they don't really go into like the installation, the deployment, some of the things that somebody that takes, if they were to take the exam reference guide, and I'm not knocking it, it's a great book. There's very specific use cases for it. If you take that and you pass the exam and then you go, and get a job where it's like, well, how do I deploy it? Like, and you're just looking at the docs and, so we kind of wanted to capture some of here's how you actually use it. Here's what it looks like, not just what it is. There's definitely some of that, right? We can't go super into depth on everything. Like I said, they kind of had a threshold of pages for us. So kind of had to find a happy medium of detail and let's just cover this. A lot of it's based also on, the percentage of, if you look at the breakdown of the exam, it gives like a percentage of how much. So we tried to align that as well in terms of depth. So who knows, if we write a second one, it will probably be better. I think, everybody's progression of work gets better as they learn, but I think I think it'll be a great book. I'm excited about it. I feel a little bit better now that it's done.
The other part that was difficult too, Joe, was the fact that we as Microsoft employees, we couldn't share too much that we knew was on the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So we were 40-50% done with the book, and we knew announcements were coming that were
More
going
than that, yeah.
And it's like, oh, and so we tried to let the publishing company know, saying we can't share because it's against the policy for Microsoft employees to write with non-Microsoft companies to let you know this, but we either need to we're going to rewrite a couple things to just know why we're rewriting it, or renaming, which was the biggest deal for us, and then also knowing whenever the exams were going to be revisioned, right? And saying, I know that PAX had a publishing timeline originally. I think it was like May, and we're like, hey, we might need to expedite this because Microsoft's going to, through Pearson, they're going to go ahead and rev up the exam, and there's going to be changes. And so the hardest part about doing exam reference books is that they're only good for about a year at the most.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And so we're writing current but futuristically as well. Saying how we hope to get 8 to 12 months of shelf life out of this, because Microsoft, we change things all the time, and it's lacking job security. But I mean, when you're writing a book, it takes one person to see one misnamed product to completely throw the validity of the book out the window. Yeah. And we're trying to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. And that's another reason why we try to take the approach of like, we have to capture more real life things in there, because if we strictly just do the relevancy goes down if it's just the exam stuff. Because like you said, the shelf life. So we tried to do what we could to extend that shelf life of making it a little bit more relevant. So while things have changed, and right before it was finalized, we were able to capture all of the rebranding. But one thing that really bothered me, being an MDE guy, was, we started writing in June of last year, and as you know, in late October, November of last year, the unified client for down-level servers came out, and it was like, we had just submitted everything, and I was like, I can't go back and rewrite this whole chapter. But by the time the book comes out, people are gonna be like, MMA, like what? Like, so there's some frustrations there as an exam book writer. I should say that you're constantly fighting that. But it got to the point where like, let's just get it out. Yeah, otherwise it's never gonna come out. We're constantly gonna be rewriting, and it's like, so it's very interesting but fun.
Yeah. Well, the agent's still in public preview, isn't it? So hopefully, for your sake, it stays in preview for another couple of years, and you get you get a couple of years more shelf life out of the book.
Yeah, I do have some information there, but
go on.
Should be coming soon. I'll say that.
Good stuff.
That's the hope. That's the hope.
I get, because one of the things, because it's you mentioned how you have to stick to the time schedule and all that, and I've started doing a book as well, and I was amazed how early on, very quickly, I realized two things. One is how I underestimated how long this thing would take. I didn't realize how much work it was, because I do a lot of writing and stuff, but writing a book is so different. And two, I didn't realize how much original research I would have to do to get what I wanted. And I guess, so what the question I come on the back of that is, you guys, you're doing this day in, day out. This is your life and your jobs. How much did you guys actually have to learn? How much was new information for you guys, even though you're doing it day in, day out?
So like for the MDE and MDI stuff, I knew that pretty in and out. But there's a lot of things that I do in my line of work that we don't go into a lot of like the additional configurations. It's like, get the tooling out there, capture telemetry, and let's move forward in the investigation. So there were some things where it's like, I don't do any DSE work, which I don't know if that's like an industry term or a Microsoft thing. That's like a dedicated support engineer. So as a customer engineers like myself will get assigned to larger customers, or customers really of all size, for their contract, right? So we have like a bucket of hours that they've purchased, and we work dedicated with those customers. And then there's like transactional work where, we bounce from customer to customer. We may engage with them for a week, a day, an hour, whatever it is that they want to capture our attention for. And there's people that just do DSE work. There's people that just do transactional work. I feel like some of those people have a little bit broader skills. Not to say that people in my industry don't. Mine's probably deeper in certain areas than people that do more transactional work, because they're dealing with customers that are like, what are this, what are that, what's this part of the feature, things that we don't necessarily look at within IR. So while I knew a lot about the MDE and MDI, there were certainly things that I had to go and remind myself on. It's like, you think you know something so well, and then you say it out loud, and you're like, "Is that right? Have I been wrong for like ever?" So certainly, even things that I thought I knew well, I had to go and reread, and because you're putting it in writing, right? You don't want to be wrong, and so there were certainly times where I had to go reread something, and there were definitely times where I was like, "I was wrong about that. I had this backwards," So we're all human. There's way too much to know, but certainly writing, you have to double check yourself a lot.
Yeah. And then luckily we had, some of the, not just the naming, but sometimes there were some fundamental changes to specific product SKUs that happened during our authoring process, which for me, I'll speak pretty bluntly here. On the Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Defender for Cloud suite of tools, the ones for like open relational databases, as well as Azure Resource Manager and for DNS, those three are pretty weak for me, from like a knowledge as well as a customer interaction or enterprise implementation perspective. And so whenever I was writing this, I was like, oh, wow, I'm grateful for this book, because it was so interesting how almost in parallel, there will be a request that came in like during my new role that I'm in now for those technologies specifically. I was like, well, would you look at that? Yeah. And here's the other cool thing too, is that there were I had a call with the customer. And I didn't mean to be rude. I don't think I came across rude. I'm the type of guy I can say things, but luckily the tone's there. You know what I mean? And so, Joe, you know this to be true. And so the customer was talking about, hey, can I get some like SC-200 training from Microsoft? And I'm, nodding my head, knowing that we don't formally offer anything internally to them, but you can go to Global Knowledge. And so I'm like, hey, I actually wrote the book on SC-200, and good news, we have these offerings. And then when I said it, the people online from like our team said basically, well played. I was like, no, it wasn't meant to be a play. Like, I'm just talking like, I'm just telling you, like, the book, like the type that you wrote, I wrote a book on, and I know that we have internal offerings we can give you that align to the stuff that needs to be known to pass that exam. But I was like, my bad. Later on in that call, I said, hey guys, like, I kind of feel bad, team, and I didn't mean to come across arrogant or rude. And they all started laughing and said, no, actually it came across just fine. I said, okay, good. But like, I think you learn so much, because it's impossible in our roles, or really any role at Microsoft, when it comes to the content of the SC-200 exam specifically, to say that I'm a 500 out of 500 level expert in everything being tested. No, which is why I was so grateful for Joe, because in my weaker areas, he works in it every day. And so you got deep in MDI, didn't you, brother? And yeah, and he got deep on some of the underlying prerequisites for MDE. And I was like, I knew 200, 300 level, but he went down to the weeds. And I was like, awesome. And so I really think no matter where your skill set's at, if you want to elevate yourself, even in some of the buckets of technology, this is going to be a good one. And our hope and our desire is that if you come in with 100 level knowledge, but not enough knowledge to pass the exam, you read this book, you'll probably dabble yourself down comfortably for somebody who's 100 down to 250, 300, conceptually understand more, be able to map it to a solution as your daily job, and then see the questions that pop up on the exam and be able to answer them based upon reading it. So that's cool.
It's hard to, MDI could be a book on itself.
Yeah.
Then, like, as Ru knows, the components of MDE could each be books of their own. You could write a book on ASR. Yeah. ASR all up, not just the rules. You could write a short story on ASR rules. It's hard to tangibly say, if you're an L1, you might be an L. It's like, I think what it helps you do is map out how extensive the product can be or is, and it gives you, like, I tried to paint enough of a picture and then say, if you want to go deeper here, here's the exact doc where we talk about this, go deeper there. And then the next section would be, here's a good amount of information about it. If you want to go even further, here's the exact link to that. Like, I tried to paint avenues for people because, like I said, page count, I can't write everything I want to. I have to give enough. And so I tried to paint avenues for people to go down. I thought that was the best path forward. And yeah, of course, having this been my first, we'll see if that works or not. We'll see what kind of feedback we get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to be an interesting one, right? Because you guys are, I guess, through the review process, folks are going to read this book in a couple ways. They're going to look at it and say, yeah, I'm going to learn a ton about Defender and security in general, etc. But I'm also going to be reviewing the book based on whether or not I pass that exam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you approach writing it so that it's not, I will try and choose my words carefully here. Some exam reference books can be kind of dry, kind of boring, very formulaic, especially the official ones. How do you kind of make it so that it's readable? You know what I mean? And someone can actually put the time into it without dying of boredom.
Yeah. So I tried to write with that in mind. Obviously we can't give exam answers away. We can't give formal exam questions away. But the way I learn and the way I thought it would be useful for people to learn, especially in the terms of passing the exam, is the book should arm you with enough things conceptually that if you look at a question, you're like, I know enough about this that this is likely the right answer. The rest of these don't make sense. So I think it's the point of the book is, at least from my perspective, is to arm you with enough conceptually. And of course, there's some deeper details in there, but you should be able to be comfortable enough that every question, or most of the majority of the questions you look at, you should have a good enough understanding and be able to recognize enough about what the question's asking and in the options presented to you in as possible answers, that you should have a good comfort level of getting the answer right. But yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to capture and write about.
I also think that Joe and I have written enough internally for customers that the voice you both get on this very podcast is a voice you're going to get in writing. And so it's very easygoing, super readable, conversational versus, authoritative and instructive, right? And so it's so interesting. I would challenge both of you, after an hour of time with us, reach back out to us on LinkedIn and find out, because we haven't shared all the stuff that we each individually wrote. See which voice of the child belongs to which person, and then let us know. And then maybe we'll have to give a giveaway or something.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's actually some of the negative feedback we get. And I say negative because it was written to us as negative feedback of, it was hard to follow because you don't get that consistent writer personality. You may read one chapter and then you read the next chapter, like, oh, he's got some fire on this one. Like, okay, this must be Trevor. But that was actually presented to us as negative feedback from one of the reviewers, which I thought was very interesting. I had never considered that. Being new to writing, it was like, style, or should we just put the personality that we have into it and hope for the best? And
that's what we're cool.
Hope for the best.
Voices.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. If I'm thinking about reading, because I like to read fiction, it gives you a different narrator perspective, right? Like, who is the narrator from thing to thing? I feel like I would enjoy that.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting take on it. I hadn't thought about it from a nonfiction instructional point of view, that if the voices don't align, is that an issue or not? Are people going to take that very differently? Well, okay. So it's in there. We're keeping it, and that's how.
I didn't change a thing.
Awesome.
Your titles, and I was like, I don't want to do this.
Do that.
I like to write as if I'm writing to my 20-year-old self. I write how I would have wanted to learn, because I had some interesting experiences early on in my career of some of my seniors just not wanting to share, or not wanting to send me in the right direction. And so my whole career, obviously I've had great mentors, right? Great seniors. I'm just some of the ones that didn't want to share some stuff still irk me. but I tried to write on how I wanted to learn and how I thought things should be shared to some folks that are getting started. And so it's kind of like painting a picture to some folks early on in their careers or early on in the technology. I'm not saying like youth wise, but and then Trevor writes like he's presenting to a giant grand audience, and he's got all the lights shining. But I think it'll be fun. I tried to have a couple of Easter eggs in the book. We're both kind of, well, we think we're comedians. We're not. We're funny to ourselves. Probably no one else. But
dude, please share this portion because I tried to on the Microsoft Security Insights portion, but you weren't there, and it's way better for me. Share the Easter eggs.
So being the jokester that I am, if you've seen the movie Super Troopers, when they try to fit meows in everywhere they can, I tried to, if you want to learn more meow about something, this or that, I tried to sneak in about to see how many meows I could get published, but unfortunately the editors caught every single one. But we just always trying to have fun.
Yeah. You mentioned something, both of y'all had mentioned something before, that learning the way that you would have wanted to be taught, making this information accessible, which I think is so key. Because Trevor, you'd mentioned like sometimes you do have these books that are authoritarian, don't give you real world examples. So you get kind of boxed into this corner where when you're put in the real world, you're like, I don't really know what to do with this. And the concepts are very important. I taught a Power Automate workshop on Monday.
Awesome.
And the assistant and I, the other teacher and I were talking about, okay, we could talk about what every single connector does, but there's so many applications to this that if we just say, okay, we're going to use SharePoint and this, then what if they're using a SQL database? What if they're using Dataverse? So we focused really on the concepts and the building blocks of it rather than saying, okay, we're going to give you from start to finish an approval workflow and call it a day, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to know that if you give folks just what they can start with. And so Ed Gonzalez, who was also teaching with me, he was using the analogy of food. Like, okay, your whole flow is your recipe. Or that's your final dish, and your recipe is, okay, what are the little bits and pieces that you need in order to keep making that dish, and then add like a little bit of pizzazz to it, like some spices to it to make it taste good. So it feels like you have the whole flavor profile here of making it accessible. You throw a little bit of comedy in there. And making it easy for people to understand, because some of these concepts, like you said, no matter where folks are in their career, they're coming in as beginners. It also needs to be understandable. So like appealing to a wide audience, I feel is challenging in a way.
Very good point.
There was pressure. I don't know. I guess just in my own head of like, oh, you're a Microsoft person, you should write this at level 400 or level 500. It's like, well, not everybody be starting at level 500. And sorry, dust floating in front of my face. One of the things that bothered me younger in my career is I'd be reading a blog that was a fantastic blog, but me not being experienced in something, to me it was like A, E, R, Z. It's like it's skipping all of the little details. And so like Trevor and I used to write a lot of blogs. We still have a blog, but I don't promote it that much. I was trying to reignite it. I'm just very busy. But when I write, I try to write on every little nuance that people are going to try to run into, because I'd be reading a blog and be like, well, I don't know what to do here. I'm stuck. What I see in real life is not what I'm seeing here. And I try to fill in those details, because if you're starting out, there's a lot of blogs that are like, just start at level 400, which is great for the right audience. I'm not knocking any articles like that. I've tried to write some at that level for certain situations, but generally it's like I want to be able to walk somebody through, like I'm over their shoulder, how to go through something. And if you're at a higher level, then you can skip most of it and get to the end. But yeah, that always bugged me as a younger fella trying to learn things. It's like, can anybody just fill in the details for me? I'm OCD about that. And like, if I don't know everything about something, I get very frustrated. And like it's mostly because when I share that information, which I love to share, I feel like I'm not being genuine, because I'm not painting the right picture, or I'm sharing just what I've memorized, not what I know. And it's interesting.
Another piece
Yeah.
too is whenever we were trying to go deeper into really stepping items out for the readers, we found, sadly, that a lot of times if you're following the public documentation by Microsoft, you have to hop from one to another to
Oh my
another.
God, our docs
That
are.
was me yesterday. Oh my, yes.
Before
It's
you
like
know
how
it,
many clicks to Jesus,
yeah,
on Wikipedia.
it's like
I just went through this for I'll just call it out, the Defender for Cloud, Defender for Servers, onboarding. It's about 5 pieces of separate docs that you're
Let me tell
pinging
you
back and
something.
forward.
I was
On
looking
that
at
exact point
LM.
there, Ru,
Yeah.
read the book because Joe has it all in a single chapter. So
Exactly.
Nice.
Yep.
And that's the thing. It's like, oh my goodness, like I have mad ADHD. And so if I had to hop between tabs, I'm gonna forget what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And that came up when we were writing this book. And I was like, oh my God. Like, Chrome uses so much memory. My computer was crashing on me because I had like 90 tabs open. And then I'm like, we have to do better, right? So that was some of the feedback because we did a Microsoft Security Insights podcast where we have some folks from the JTA and like our docs, people who like author our docs. And Joe gave that feedback on our previous session. And the guy who wrote the docs, or at least signs off on it, was just like nodding his head in ways that anybody can see. Like he understands. And so that's the thing. It's like, look, if I'm a novice and I go out and Google or Bing it as I'm supposed to as an employee, and I'm like, how to deploy MDE at mass for everything. You might get a partner, you might get a random blog, you might get our docs, but like you kind of have to hop between them all to make sense of it all to what the real world requires you. And so that chapter for us, amongst all of them, to have any deployment steps or prerequisite steps are very clear and consolidated in a single readable process and format that you can follow from top to bottom and not have to say, man, Trevor and Joe missed a step. What's this do? Like,
Yes.
We hope we got it.
Let's
Yeah,
stop yapping, Trevor, and let's get on to some of the other questions.
I was going to say one last point. I know for conferences and whatnot, when I first started watching conferences a couple of years ago, that there was all this really big stuff that you could do with Microsoft products. But it was very rare when you saw someone who was like, okay, but here's how you get started. Because I understand that conferences appeal to different audiences. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is really cool, but I don't know how to get to the building blocks to start building something this cool. Or it was such a niche topic, right? And I feel as you go up, right, the audiences get a little bit smaller too. So I applaud y'all for trying to make it accessible to everyone, understandable for everyone, because I think that's something that we really do need in the greater community for sure.
And you're not alone in thinking that way. I mean, huge majority of people internally think the same way. I mean, the people that write the docs probably think the same way. We're all trying to fix the problem. It's a huge company. There's a ton of stuff that we have in our portfolio. It's a giant work in progress, and the people that write the docs, they're wonderful folks. They do a fantastic job. It's just trying to align what they do versus how we perceive things. And because Trevor and I, along with many CEs, CSA, I mean, name your role, everybody's had a part in getting docs changed or getting them reordered or etc. So yeah, it's a giant work in progress.
Yeah, and the way that I this is one of my pet peeves, and I think I mentioned it on the show before, is folks, customers, partners, they kind of say they refer to Microsoft as one thing, and they'll say, oh, Microsoft haven't done a good job at this. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking Microsoft is a company that is the size of a country.
Yeah.
It's like when you say one bit thing is doing something wrong, well, it's one tiny little team within that larger team, right? And the idea that everything could be tied up and be perfect all the time, that's just not realistic. The pace of change is too quick, and there's too many moving parts for that to happen.
I saw a tweet yesterday about someone from Microsoft who admitted, like, yes, we understand this is not okay, but you have to realize all the work that goes in on the back end of it too. Because people are like, why aren't you reaching out to users to see what their opinions are? And they're like, we have, but there's actually not a great way to implement this as easily as we would like. We're working on it, which having that transparency is great. But Ru, I think you're right. People forget that it's not just, we can just get this thing out and it's going to be perfect for everyone, right? There's still going to be some things, and there's room for improvement. So
some of the, and I see a lot of that on Twitter too, and I take it with a grain of salt. I get their frustrations. I try to understand everybody's frustrations. They're in their silo, and something's not working for them. That's frustrating. That's frustrating whether I'm internal or external. But if people step back sometimes and consider the saturation of Microsoft products around the world, it's like we'd love to change a lot of things, but we also can't bring down operations for companies. We can't just make all of the changes we want at once. We have to do them gradually. We have to do extensive testing internally that takes months because we have to understand. I mean, the breadth of difference in customers. I mean, it's every customer, it's every branch, it's every industry, it's everything, and we have to try to make changes that are unified across the board, and it's hard. I think that I'm probably preaching to the choir, but yeah, it's frustrating, especially when people are criticizing things that you're working on, and but at the same time you have to understand their frustration. So it's a fine balance of getting what they're saying, but then also kind of taking it with a grain of salt of, yeah, well, I know why it's not changing, or why it will change eventually, or so. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, most things do work out okay in the end. I mean, it's like we were talking about the unified agent earlier. For so long, I'd be working with customers and they'd be saying, well, I'm still using 2016. Why can't I get ASR rules? And then before you know it, you've got the unified agent and you're getting them. So it's like, these things take time. And when you look at to use Defender for Endpoint as an example, when you look at the crazy diversity of platforms that thing supports now, all these different types of Linux and Mac OS, you're just never going to get the exact same features on all of them at the exact same time. It's just manage your expectations.
Yeah. Then you're spot on. I mean, that's like generally the criticism. It's like, well, hey, why don't I see it's on Linux, but why don't I have, this or that? It's like, yeah,
give it time. Yeah,
give it time. Let it cook.
yeah, for sure. And so I guess one of the things I kind of want to pick up as well is this is the SC-200. It's not an easy exam, right? And I don't even think I'd say it was an entry level exam. It's there's a lot of work you have to go into there, and I don't even know if you could do it without some level of real world experience and quite a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I also think, as far as who it's targeted towards, it's definitely targeted towards like that kind of, maybe the sysadmin who is a jack of all trades, or maybe it's looking at the guy that's in the blue team and they're managing defense of their internal IT. Do you guys do you live in that Microsoft bubble? Because there's other security stuff, there's other security exams and platforms and stuff out there as well. What should folks be supplementing this with, you know what I mean, to kind of get that overall good security knowledge behind them?
Yeah, so that's why we, spend some time talking about the different lab approaches that you can take, because you're right. I mean, I would say the exam is harder because because of the breadth of things that you need to know, not necessarily like the difficulty of each one. It's just there's a lot to consume. I mean, just the Sentinel section alone is like 40%. I mean, that's a lot of content. But in terms of experience, I think that's probably going to be your best bet. Just reading an exam ref guide is not enough in most cases, unless you're just a savant and can absorb everything you read, which isn't the majority of us. I think with any exam, there's a level of accountability that comes with, if you're trying to pass this exam. I mean, you have to put in the effort. You have to feel comfortable with yourself taking this exam. Like, if you know the content on there and you're looking through the bullet points, what's on the exam, if you're like, I don't really know that or that, but I think I know enough. It's like, well, that's on you then. There's, like I said, it's a level of accountability to, trust that you understand enough of the concepts to take a crack at it. But yeah, I guess just kind of circling back, it would just be, experience. I mean, you got to get your hands wet. You got to build a lab. You have to see it. You have to see how it works. If you just read a doc and you understand a concept in a doc, but you can't relate that to a thing, it becomes challenging, especially as questions start to build on each other. If you've taken any of the Microsoft exams, you can kind of see patterns where it asks a lower level question, and then the next question, or maybe a few questions on the road, is kind of an offshoot of that one question that's a little bit more advanced. So if you're not getting the experience in building through proof of concepts, other than just reading the docs, I feel like it's hard to kind of jump in difficulty as you go through an exam. So experience, build a lab, get your hands wet, start messing around with it. The contention around E5 is like, oh, it's super expensive. It is. But understand what it comes with, and think of it as an investment in yourself. Buy it for a month, buy it for 2 months, set an expiration date. I'm going to buy it for 3 months. I'm going to invest $150+ into myself and learn. And maybe if your employer can expense it, great. Think of it as a continuing education thing for yourself, not just, hey, it's expensive licensing. I know it's expensive licensing. I'm not going to deny that. But yeah, it's investment in yourself and get into it, get experience. Even if it's a small lab, one machine, just poke around, uninstall things, install things, break them on purpose, disable the network, disable the NIC and try to install things. See where in the log it tells you that, hey, I can't talk out to install it. There's so much that you can do with one little segment of the exam with one little virtual machine. So yeah, experience, get it through a lab if you can, break things.
Yeah, definitely break stuff. And the way that one of the ways that I've started trying to teach myself stuff as well is I just come up with a bunch of hypothetical scenarios. I kind of say, well, if I was trying to do this, right, so I want to do A, B, C, and D, write it down, go away and figure out how to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed, like, how we were harping on about the docs earlier, right? And I guess when you combine the docs, which are way better than they used to be 10 years ago, docs.microsoft.com instead of TechNet it's night and day. I'm always amazed at how easy it is to kind of teach yourself stuff, right? Through the use of your book, through the use of docs. You just sit down with a lab and you can do it all from your chair. You know what I mean? You don't have to go to night classes and college and stuff to do this stuff. You just spin up a lab and go for it.
Yeah, and I mean, and then things like you put on the internet, on Twitter, and other people in the industry, consume their content. People are putting in work to share things. There's enough content in the world to give you a great idea of what it is that you're seeking. And it comes back to the accountability thing. If you really want to learn something, it's there for you. And part of what Trevor and I try to do in the earlier chapters, especially around the lab stuff, is here are all of the things that will give you a great path forward to start to learn some of the things in this exam, the different trial methods, the different labs you can do, whether it's building your own like greenfield lab, like literally building DCs, building Figman, and then deploying things. You learn a ton just doing that. Even though it's not necessarily related to the exam, you learn a bunch.
Yeah.
Or just grab an E5 or whatever license comes with MDE. I'm not a licensing expert by any stretch. None of us are. And go through the simulations, where you can spin up some virtual machines within the Defender portal and just you gotta put in the time.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm looking at the chapter list just now on the PACT website, and I see right at the beginning, chapter 2, a quick introduction to the terminology. Yeah, that's a good one because anyone that's starting, well, really with anything, I don't care what it is, if it's in tech, it's going to have weird language that you need to relearn. But the Defender space in general is kind of infamous for having not just the name changes, but loads of interesting terms.
Yeah, redundant terms too. Like you'll say something internally to like somebody in a different role, and they're going off about what it is to them, and you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? It's like we reuse acronyms. It's tough. We're not making it easier on ourselves.
Another one we like to do for anybody who's more novice was put up that chapter around the transition of traditional security and modern security, so that people understand, like, hey, if I'm just coming out of college or I'm just now entering into, the IT security space, what am I entering into? And, I think I, as probably Joe as well, just because of our age in the industry, there's often challengers in a room virtually or in person that have a more traditional approach to security. And so how do we go ahead and meet them where they're at from a knowledge perspective, but also help transform and shift their mindset to how these technologies apply today, how they still apply traditionally, and how they're going to apply in the future. Was a fun chapter to go ahead and write about too, for sure.
Yeah. Good
I
stuff.
have a question. So supplementary, are there any like Microsoft virtual training days that folks could do to help them study for the exams too? I know I've seen the Cloud Skills Challenge, and that's fundamentals, but I did see through April virtual training days, and I wasn't sure if there were any that also applied for any of the SC examinations too.
I don't know if there's anything specific to SC-200 in terms of, training days. There's the ninja training, which would be maybe related to that, which is good stuff. That's actually probably one of the better things that takes the chaos of the documentation out of it for you, because it puts it in a nice order for you on how you should progress through it, all the direct links. And then there's like the learning paths that are kind of like, if you've gone through the learning paths, they're great. Honestly, I look at them from time to time myself, where it's like a nice little excerpt and then a video, and an excerpt and a video, and a nice graphic. That it's very simple, but I think it does a great job of like explaining to you what things are conceptually. So that's something out there that's available. But I know we do. I'll try to track down the link once Trevor starts talking. Where we post like an itinerary of public forums that will open up. Heike, who runs that, will post like, here are all of the security webinars that we have coming up. Like Dart, I think they're doing a Q&A soon. That's a cool thing. But in terms of like a boot camp, I don't know of anything, but that's not to say that there isn't. I just don't know. Sorry. Trevor, do you know?
Likewise, nothing that I'm aware of that's like from Microsoft formally. There's a lot out there through third-party training partners and vendors out there that will put on a course like that, either virtually or like an in-person class like you're traditionally used to being a part of, but nothing formally. I mean, obviously, if you're a Microsoft customer, you do have the ability, if you have like a unified or premier support contract, to have folks like the Joes of the world to put together a 3-4 day workshop for you to have that formal training. But outside of that selection of customers, nothing public yet that I'm aware of.
And that's something to take note of, that we don't have that.
Yeah, so buy the book.
Yes, there you go.
I mean, like, I don't do a lot of public facing things anymore. So like this podcast is, I wouldn't say outside my comfort zone, but something I don't do generally. When I do what I do customer facing is like where, things are on fire and the conversation is a little bit different. But knowing that there's the, I guess, want for more structured, like visual training, I know a lot of the right people. I could certainly say, hey, is there anything on the roadmap? Are we thinking about more public forums of training other than just our docs? Is there a way we can expand on the learning paths to give more of a structured training? So definitely can send that feedback.
Yeah, good stuff. And I guess I'm conscious of time here because I don't want. I in the day job I do 365 Defender day in day out, and I could easily go on for like 6 hours at the weekends as well.
Yeah.
So I need to be careful that I don't overdose on Defender. But I guess as far as kind of wrapping it up and things like that, if you had like, I guess single bullet point, what's the big piece of advice you could give to someone that's looking at studying for this exam? What's the main thing that they need to consider other than buying the book?
Patience. I think some folks might feel pressure, especially if this is a requirement. I know, when I started out and we had a requirement to get a certification, it was like, it was a lot of pressure. But I think that pressure sometimes comes with, feeling rushed or being rushed. There's no timeline. You have to learn. So take your time, set, what helps me is like set, if you're going to take the exam and you're going to dedicate yourself to doing it, schedule it for 3 months out, whatever. I don't know how far you can schedule out, but put it on the books, and that'll light a fire. That'll light a fire for most people, that, especially if you have the accountability to do it. But just patience. You don't feel like if you read something that you have to absorb it all and be able to speak on it. The amount of times I've read the same doc 100 times, even though I think I know it. I mean, there's just too much to know. So don't feel the pressure that you have to know everything. As I'm guilty of myself, and probably all of us are at times. Just have patience. Do it enough times. Get repetitive with what you're doing, and it'll come. But yeah, a single bullet point would just be have patience. Don't put that pressure on yourself.
I think mine would be, it's a two-part, but it can all be summed up in one. Just do it. You're going to know more than you think. And so oftentimes whenever we're approaching maybe something new in our technological career, there's a lot of fear of saying, oh, I'm just now entering into this where there's individuals way older than me who have 20 years experience. There's no way I'm going to stack up. That's actually incorrect. And so technology is making jobs easier. And so the quicker that you can embrace and adapt to technology changes, and understand conceptually what might have been required from a knowledge perspective previously to what you need to know to be rather effective now, don't doubt yourself. Just go out and do it. There's nothing stopping you. Hopefully there's not a financial burden. The labs that you can spin up are free for 180 days. Everything's at your fingertips from a Google or Bing perspective. You no longer need to go to a training course or talk to the most senior person on your team. You could be very self-sufficient and do it on your own. So just, if it's interesting and this piques just like even a minor light bulb for you in your brain, go after it and don't stop. And then reach out to us if you have any questions.
And ask questions. Find peers, find people on this call, like you two wonderful folks. Ask questions. My whole life's motto is like, you're never going to get what you don't ask for. So ask questions. If you're afraid to ask somebody above you a question because you think they're going to look down upon you, find a different person to ask. If that's the personality that individual is going to have, that they're not worth you trying to pry information out of. Find like-minded people in the industry. There are plenty of them, and ask questions. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask questions, or they think that it's going to be perceived wrong. If you're asking people that give you that kind of response, then find new people to surround yourself with, and rid yourself of the toxicity if that's the response you're getting. Find a new circle, but ask people. I think you'd be surprised at what people will say. I know if anybody asks me a question on Twitter, which I'm not, I just rejoined Twitter, so I'm not like a huge user of it, but I follow a ton of people that I know are so much smarter than I am. But at the drop of a hat, I would never hesitate to ask them a question. Yeah. Just ask. Just ask questions.
I find myself nodding like so hard here, like because
yes.
I get. I remember the first IT job I ever had. I was in there for about a week, straight out of college, and other IT guy sitting across from me, and I just kind of something comes up and I ask him a question, and he turns to me and he says, "Geez, you ask a lot of questions," and he said it in kind of a derogatory way.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me for so long, and it kind of pushed me back a little bit. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to shut up. But now I look at it and I'm like, nah, I'm going to do the opposite. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm put in the gas, it's because it's what helps you get where you are,
Yeah.
And kind of like I've always been told, like, asking you shall receive kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you don't get what you want out of life, or you don't just improve your general knowledge without asking that kind of stuff, right? You have to go away and pull it out of people.
Yeah, and even like learning how to ask, because there are certainly times where somebody asks me a question. It's like, did you do anything to try to find the answer. Like,
There
you know,
we go.
if you come to me and say, hey, I was trying to learn about this, I'm trying to figure this out, I think it's this or that, you know, what are your thoughts about it? Oh, your rate of success is going to increase. So it's like, you know, I'll say it again, it's accountability. You know, don't be afraid to ask, but also show that you're putting in effort as well. And I think if you come to people and ask the right way, like when I first started, and this is like a long-term history thing with Microsoft, is like, and Trevor will contest to this, it's like, you don't talk to PG. Like the CEs and PG, like that's not a relationship. I broke that barrier down the day I started. I was like, I work for Microsoft. I work with some of the smartest people in the world. I'm asking you questions. I don't care if you like it or not. If you don't respond, that's on you. I'll find another person. And I have built so many wonderful relationships with people that are at levels I'll never attain. But they're the nicest, sweetest people that you can imagine. You know, there's like I'd meet people at conferences when I was younger, and I'd see this aura around people. I remember seeing Mark Rusinovich on an escalator, and I was like, I swear there's an aura around this dude. You know, he's like one of the nicest people ever. So,
like Mark Simos. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Or Yang Ri. I saw Yang Ri in a cafeteria one time. I was like, there's a halo around this fella.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some sweet people out there. So yeah, just be genuine, ask questions.
Yeah, I think a big thing with that, because talking to students on Monday was the same thing, is Google first, right? Like try a few things first and then let us know what you've tried.
You mean Bing, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, excuse me, that's a curse word here. Bing, Microsoft, I'm sorry. Maybe that's why I'm not getting royalties.
Well, I'll tell you what, you know, who was it said it? I can't remember. I think it was a Microsoft guy. I think it might have been Jeffrey Snover, the father of PowerShell, or it might have been Mark Manazzi interviewing. Can't remember, something like that. He said, "You know what Bing stands for, don't you? It stands for because it's not Google." So there you go.
There's probably some level of truth to that. Who knows? It is an interesting name.
Yeah. So yeah, do your research a little bit first, and then you ask for help, because then people will know what you've tried, and then they can, you know, give you some guidance rather than okay, we're just gonna try something that sticks here.
Yeah, I will caveat that though, if it's like a super you know new person, just graduated, or you know didn't graduate, because I don't think college is a prereq to anything being, you know, in terms of success in the industry. I think that's I think college is great. I think we could all talk about the pros of it, but I think it's nonsense to have that as a barrier to entry of anything. I know people self-taught that. In fact, one of the main individual that got me into IT, self-taught, dropped out of college because he couldn't afford it. And I mean, it's such a silly thing to hold over people's heads, let alone the cost. And honestly, like degree that I have, I'm not going to name the college, even though people can look on my LinkedIn. It's like, I'm not sure I got much from it. You know, maybe that's on me, but yeah, just accountability. It always comes back to that. Just be a passion for it. You'll find a way.
I'm going to
even admitting like you don't know where to start, I think is always a great thing too, right? Because sometimes I'll be like, I don't even know the right keywords to look up or the right keywords to ask, but let me describe my scenario, and maybe somebody else will know exactly what I'm talking about too. I do that a lot. So
for sure.
Yeah. Wrapping down the show, I don't want to finish talking about the technical stuff. So, you know, I'm aware that, so obviously, you know, Joe, if you're in IR, and Trevor, you know, you work for Microsoft, and I know that you guys are crazy busy. How do you guys, what kind of, other than, you know, InfoSec, what do you guys do to chill out, relax, not think about tech?
Well, I have a 1-year-old, so that by default is something I'm forced to think. I'm just kidding. I like fitness. I like, you know, I play basketball on Thursdays. I like getting out of my chair and, you know, anti-sedentary lifestyle of just being active, and love golf. The very, 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 very little time I have to golf anymore, I still am very passionate about it, but just being active, you know, sitting and staying focused and looking at a screen. I try to do the absolute opposite of that outside of work. But yeah, stay active, hiking. I love hiking. see nature. I love astronomy. I love looking at the sky at night.
Cool.
All sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with my beautiful soon-to-be fiance, so I enjoy the work-life balance aspect more so now that I have since Joe's known me. You can agree on that one, brother.
He didn't have a balance.
Yeah. What is that? So yeah, I'm grateful for her. And then I've been relighting a little bit of a fire from like an audio engineering standpoint, because my girl, she's an artist, and so trying to relearn some audio engineering stuff to kind of help her record stuff on the fly. It's kind of geeky but fun, but it's not technically, defensive security. And then, like Joe, I love golf, and so I was telling Ru before we went live, I'll actually be in Scotland here in June for a golf trip. I'll be there for 2 weeks. So Ru will definitely have a pint or 4 or 5, and definitely tour some Scotch distilleries and have a good time.
Yeah, for sure. Let me know what one it is, and I'll see you there. It's a Scotsman never says no to a drinking contest.
Yeah, that's us.
Good stuff. Okay, cool. Well, guys, it was a real pleasure having you on. We'll link to, I guess, your Twitter's, LinkedIn's, and also the book in the show notes for the page. Before we sign out, do you want to, if you have anything else to promote, please go ahead and do it, and also let folks know where they can find you.
Yeah. The other thing I would promote, so I'm starting on another book. I think it's very much aligned with what you're writing, Ru. It's going to be an MDE book. We have 4 authors on this one. Myself, one of the feature PMs for the Unified Agent, actually is a wonderful talent. Somebody in the ASR space within Microsoft, and then somebody in our internal SOC. So some cool experiences that we're bringing in. We're going to try to go as deep as legal will let us on MDE. I just see a lot of conversations with customers where we want to right some wrongs with how things are done. So don't have a lot of details about it yet. We've got the outline down. It's approved. We've started writing some things, but maybe if we see you again or something, I'll make a note and we can talk a little bit more about it. But otherwise, my Twitter handle, this is where I'm not a hardcore geek, is TRK_RBY, I think. I'm exposing myself. Yeah, TRK_RBY. I talk about either nonsense or things that Twitter's changed in the UI that are obnoxious. But no,
okay,
I try to help out. I try to help out where I can. I follow Ru. If he comments on a lot of things, I try to help out or inject some details that might be useful for folks. But yeah.
Just follow on Twitter. I mean, my tweet this morning was like, man, my sleep was real good. I woke up with drool in the crook of my neck. So, it doesn't have to all be technical here.
And I guess on my side of the house here, I'm also writing another book. It's going to be hardening and defending Microsoft directories. So it'll be Azure Active Directory as well as our traditional Active Directory. So we'll go pretty deep on that. I have a different co-author, but Joe and I are still tied at the hip, so don't worry about that. And so his name's Kip, and so Kip has written internally IP that's available for customers as part of Active Directory hardening, and a few other things like ACL X-rays. I mean, just real deep directory stuff that you need to know in order to defend it and harden it as best as possible against known attack vectors, which is like 206 that we're going to talk about. So that my fault, Joe. Typical, nothing to change here, brother. The outline is late, but it will be submitted this week and will be approved. So look there. I'm not really big on social media, so I don't really have like a Twitter or anything like that. I have a private Instagram, which that's kind of like for me and my homies. And then I do have a LinkedIn. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. So just hit me up there, Trevor Stewart. And that's me. If you can find Trevor Stewart at Microsoft or a solution architect, that's going to be me. Come follow me, connect with me, message me, hit me up. I'm relatively active on there. And that's my social media, so to speak. So
also, super, super big thanks to you, Ru and Azure.
Yeah, thank you.
This is awesome. Like I said, it's not necessarily in my comfort zone, but I want to start doing this type of thing more. So I appreciate you very, very much, both of you, for giving us a platform to talk about, you know, some of the things that we're doing, and, you know, would love to speak with you guys again if there's anything else that you would ever want to talk about.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's
you
do
know,
it.
the new books, you know, definitely, we know when the books come out, we'll get you back on. We'll talk about them.
Yeah.
It's been really good to have you.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Because we always talk about in the show, we always feel like we're in such a bubble, and it's like, you know, you just assume everyone knows all this stuff, but they don't. So it's good to just get folks.
I don't.
Yeah.
I work the furthest from security, and I always learn something new every time I'm on here. So this is great. Thanks for stepping out of your comfort zone, wherever you are in the panel. Thank you for stepping out of your comfort zone to join us today. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Cool. Right. We'll sign off. Cheers, guys.
Right.
See you all
Take care.
soon.
bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.